Hello students, today we are going to start the topic that is biological basis of behavior. So you all know that there is one important determinant of behavior, and that is the biological structures, and we all have inherited all these structures from our ancestors in the form of developed body and brain. Okay, so in the previous segment we have discussed all these topics, and we all also know that the importance of such a biological basis becomes obvious when we observe cases in which brain cells have been destroyed by any disease and use of drugs or an accident and so on. And such cases develop various kinds of physical and behavioral disabilities. Many children also develop mental retardation and other abnormal symptoms due to transmission of a faulty gene from the parents. And because of all these reasons, actually it is very important for us to study the biological basis of behavior. And in this segment we'll discuss the topics that are part of biological basis of behavior, and they are the neurons, nerve impulse and synapse. Okay, so first one is the neuron. So neurons actually is also known as the nerve cell, and it is the basic unit of our nervous system, and they are the specialized cells which possess the unique property of converting various forms of stimuli into electrical impulses. So they are also specialized for reception, conduction and transmission of information in the form of electrochemical signals. They receive information from sense organs or from other adjacent neurons and carry them to the central nervous system. And there are two parts of central nervous system: there's spinal cord and brain, and bring motor information from the central nervous system to the motor organs, and they are the muscles and glands. So nearly 12 billion neurons are found in the human nervous system, and they are of many types and vary considerably in shape, size and chemical compositions. And they are known as the building, neurons are known as the building blocks of our nervous system. And therefore, in order to comprehend the structure and function of the nervous system, it is very important that we understand the structure and function of a neuron. So there are 12 billion neurons that are found in the human nervous system, but despite differences, they share three fundamental components, and these are soma or cell body, then dendrites and axon. The soma or cell body, it is the main body of a nerve cell, and it contains the nucleus of the cell as well as the other structures common to the living cells of all types. Okay, so the genetic material of the neuron is stored inside the nucleus, and it becomes actively engaged during cell reproduction and protein synthesis. And the soma also contains most of the cytoplasm, that is the cell fluid of the neuron. And the second important part is known as the dendrites, and they are also known as the receiving end of a neuron, and that they are known as receiving cell, and they are branch-like specialized structures emanating from the soma. A diagram, it shows that it emanates from the soma, and they are the receiving ends of a neuron, and their function is to receive the incoming neural impulses from adjacent neurons or directly from the sense organs. On dendrites are found specialized receptors which become active when a signal arrives in electrochemical or biochemical form. The received signals are passed on to soma, then to axon, so that the information is relayed to another neuron or to muscles. Okay, so the dendrites actually, they receive the information from the nearby neuron or directly from the sense organs, and it receives information through soma or cell body and passes all the information to the axon. So axons actually conducts the information along its length, which can be several feet in the spinal cord and less than a millimeter in the brain. Okay, so axon in that sense is known as the sending type, and it sends information to the next neuron with the help of the terminal button. So at the This diagram, it shows that at the terminal point the axon branches into small structures and they are known as the terminal buttons. Okay, so these buttons have the capability for transmitting information to another neuron, gland and muscle. So this diagram, it shows that cell body, that is soma, it is the cell's life, its support center. Okay, then dendrites, they receive messages from other cells. An axon, it passes messages away from the cell body to other neurons, muscles and glands. And myelin set, it covers the axon of some neurons and helps speed neural impulses. And at the end of the axon, actually there are some tips of the axon and they are known as the terminal buttons, and they form junctions with other cells. So neurons generally conduct information in one direction, that is from the dendrites through soma and axon to the terminal buttons. So this is the procedure actually. Okay, so eta way te hoday information bilak neurone ki kore carry kore, they conduct information in one direction, that is from the dendrites. Okay, dendritor pora axon ole information bilak pothua hoy, kintu dendritor pora actually ki somar jugedi information pothua hoy to the axon and axon to the terminal buttons. So this is the process. So the conduction of information from one place to another in the nervous system is done through nerves. Okay, and these are the bundles of axons. And there are three actually main types of nerves, and there are mainly two types of nerves, and they are known as the sensory nerves, and that is also known as efferent nerves. Second one is the motor nerves or efferent nerves, and there is another type of nerve that is known as the mixed nerve or internerve. And the first is known as the sensory nerve or sensory neuron. Okay, so sensory neuron is also known as the efferent nerves or incoming neurons actually, and they receive information from the sense receptors and forward them to the central nervous system and for interpretation. And the cell body of the efferent nerve is located on the nerve root, which is outside the spinal cord, and the connector of interneurons are merely conductors. Okay, so this is the sensory neuron or the efferent nerves. And second is known as the motor neuron or motor nerves, and motor nerves actually, they are also known as efferent nerves or outgoing nerves, and they pass on the messages from the central nervous system to the muscles and those parts of the body involved in actions such as glands. A motor neuron is directly responsible for all the movements and responses that we make. In these neurons, the cell body is located in the spinal cord, and the axon is long enough to reach a neighboring neuron or even the muscle or gland to which it relays inputs. And the third type of neuron is known as the mixed nerve or mixed interneuron, and these are mainly located in the central nervous system, and 85% of them being in the brain. They receive incoming information from the sense organs or body's internal environment and process the information and pass it for action to the motor neurons. Okay, so the sensory and motor fibers in these nerves are different, and these neurons make many contacts with each other before reaching a motor neuron, that is known as the mixed nerves or interneuron. Then the next is known as the nerve impulse. Okay, so the nature of the stimulus also is related to this nerve impulse, and the strength of the nerve impulse, however, does not depend on the strength of the stimulus that started the impulse. Always remember it. And actually, nerve impulse is the passage of nerve sensation from one place to another through electrochemical process of conduction in the nerve. Okay, so when stimulus energy comes into contact with receptors, electrical changes in the nerve potential start, and the nerve potential is a sudden change in the electrical potential of the surface of a neuron. So when the stimulus energy is relatively weak, the electrical changes are so small that the nerve impulse is not generated and we do not feel the stimulus. And if the stimulus energy is relatively strong, electrical impulses are generated and conducted towards the central nervous system. Okay, so the strength of the nerve impulse, however, does not depend on the strength of the stimulus that started the impulse. The nerve fibers work according to the all or none principle, which means that they either respond completely or do not respond at all. The strength of the nerve impulse remains constant along the nerve fiber. So always remember that it is the passage of nerve sensation from one place to another through electrochemical process of conduction in the nerve, that is known as nerve impulse. And next is the synapse. Actually, nerve impulses pass on from the axon of one neuron to the dendrite of another without the nerve ending touching each other. Okay, so the nerve impulses are transmitted chemically across a small gap between the neurons, and these neurons never touch each other. So this gap or junction actually is known as synapse. Okay, so the synapse is found between the axon tip of one neuron and the dendrite of another. So when an impulse arrives at the end of an axon, electrical conduction in the axon is changed to chemical transmission. Okay, so the tiny sacs in the terminal buttons of the axons are known as synaptic vesicles, and they release a transmitting substance, and they are known as the neurotransmitters, and that carry the message to the other neurons. So in the receiving neuron, the electrical signal travels on to the next synaptic gap, and so on and so on. The single neuron in the brain may share very large number of synapses with other neurons. It is estimated that the billions of neurons in the brain have trillions of synapses. Okay, so the higher levels of complexity in information processing require circuits, systems of neurons functioning together to perform tasks that individual cell cannot carry out alone. Actually, the neural impulse from one neuron is transmitted by complex synaptic transmission process to another neuron. So the conduction of neural impulse in the axon is electrochemical, while the nature of the synaptic transmission is chemical. And these chemical substances are known as neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters actually it play major role in our behavior pattern also. And if there is any disturbance in these chemical substances, then people may develop several kinds of psychological illnesses. Okay, so dopamine, serotonin are some kinds of chemical substances, and all these are responsible for several kinds of psychological illnesses. Thank you.